Hello and welcome. I'm your host, Elizibar, and a while back I went to a local store. It's a used bookstore, but they've always got a couple boxes of comics. Actually, the comics are in the room where they keep the CDs and records and stuff. But, whatever. It's the weirdest store to get in there. You actually have to go through this, like, grungy, dark, poorly lit, kind of creepy hallway all the way around the side of the building to this back room. And there's even a sign up in the hallway that says something like, it's not a trap. Like, it's way sketchy. That store's called The Book Deal. It's here in Madison. Uh, oh, hold on. I actually had a coupon there because when you just like sign up for their mailing list, they give you like a free book. And I actually got this book for free, which I was going to ask for this as a Christmas present. And they just had this book. And it was like, oh, wow. Cool. I thought I had a copy of this book, but I can't find it. It's a great novel. It actually predicts how Disney's going to take over the world, which is kind of funny because if you look at media right now, Disney is kind of taking over the world. That's neither here nor there for why we're here, which is to talk about Alien Nation. Now, Alien Nation is there's a movie, which the movie's good, but I really like the TV show because the TV show gets to take its time telling us about the world they live in. And the comics, which I've got just a bunch of random issues. I don't have a complete miniseries for any of these. There's like 5 different miniseries here. These were all produced in like 1990, 1991, thereabouts. And so I got all these. You get enough comic books there, they get really cheap. They start costing like 50 cents a pop or something absolutely ridiculous. Which, hey, I am down for that. You know? Anyway, I got these pretty cheap and going through them. There's some cool stuff in here. There's also some kind of dumb stuff, but there's some definite cool stuff. One problem that a lot of these have is they're actually just kind of boring. And I don't mean that in a, like, the art's, like, necessarily bad or whatever. Some of the art's pretty good. I mean, it's very 80s indie art looking. But there's like some very solid ink work in here. The aliens, the newcomers, they look like they're supposed to. The gangsters look like gangsters. This first story here, A Breed Apart, is basically just like there's uh, a gang of newcomers selling drugs. That's all it is. And it's kind of boring. And I'm trying not to like make that sound terrible because there's some great drama in it. Like this guy, he's menacing a cop. You can see it doesn't go so well for him. The cop's partner shows up. Uh, there's great drama, and there's some cool action, but there's also just a lot of I don't really care about what's going on here. Like, I don't care who this guy is. I don't really care if the cops catch these people. And I think in this case, it's probably just simply because I didn't have issues 1 and 2. I just had 3 and 4. But I like the art in this. It looked good, and I did like revisiting the Alien Nation universe. One problem some of these books have, or I shouldn't say some of these, one problem that these books have, actually take it back, I do have the first miniseries, the entirety of the first Newcomers, which actually is probably the best overall, even though it's probably the worst Alien Nation story. I'll talk about that in a second, but kind of one problem that all these have is they don't revisit the characters from the TV show or the movie in any way. So, see, what was the newcomer's name in the movie? George, I think, in the TV show and the movie, and then he was partnered up with a human named Sykes, I think. We don't talk about them in any of these books, and usually when you get a novel or a miniseries set in a setting, that's a sequel or a follow up to a movie or TV show, you expect to read about these characters, the ones from the show. Like if I went over to my bookshelf and I picked up like the Thrawn trilogy novels over there. Actually, no, they're not on this bookshelf. They're actually in my basement because I gave my little paperbacks to my nephew. But if I went down to my basement, I got the Thrawn trilogy books I have, which are some nice hardcovers from 20 years ago. And I was like, yo, guess who's in this book? And if you said Luke Skywalker, Han Solo, and Leia, you would be correct. Here, we don't see the Alien Nation detectives, or if they're in here, I just didn't notice. Now, that first miniseries, I said it was kind of boring and da da da, whatever. It doesn't really matter. This one is pretty interesting because it's not really about the newcomers. It's the least alien nation of all the stories. And we start off with this guy breaking into a government facility, stealing top secret papers. He's a like out of work reporter type deal. And he goes in search of a lost military airbase. You see the UFOs here. Guess what? Guess what? It's actually just like the X Files. This came out before the X Files, didn't it? Let me look. 1991. This either came out right before the X Files or like during the X Files' first season. And this is actually a ton of fun. These two, this reporter, this lady, they go investigating this stuff. They wind up in this small town near where this airbase is supposed to be. And in that small town, they find a bunch of people who really don't like her for being a newcomer. And everybody, the aliens show up and everybody just starts screaming, no, no, not me. We learn like some truths about the aliens, and it's a lot of fun. It absolutely is a lot of fun, and I really liked the line work in this. I mean, these are all black and white comics, so all you have to go on is the line work, I guess. But I really liked it. This is like some pretty high quality line work. You don't see this kind of line work in comic books today, hardly. It's very solid. This stuff looks like it belongs in a Sunday newspaper strip. Yeah, here they are. They're at a diner, and the locals really don't like them, which is a staple of alienation stories. But that's like the most alienation-y bit in the whole book. But you can see, like, we actually just straight up have Greys show up, and that was just a fun little kind of weird diversion. Now, my favorite miniseries, or my favorite book out of all this, as much as I liked that one was fantastic. And I might have said it was my favorite, but that was before I flipped over to here. This actually was. I'm missing the middle of the story, numbers 2 and 3. But issue 1 is set on the ship. Now, this series has a weakness, and that weakness is the art. The art is not as good as the previous two series. It's a very different style, and while it's okay, the art actually kind of reminds me of in places it reminds me of Canales' art on the Abductables, which is kind of funny because they're on the mothership. So, okay, you don't think that's funny? That's fine. But the art here, they're a little exaggeratedly lumpy. I think things take on some weird looks. It doesn't look quite right. But this story goes into like the resistance on the mothership. It goes into what their society was like back then. It's kind of cool stuff. And I'm trying to remember, like, if on the TV show they talked about how the overseers like kept them drugged all the time and stuff. I don't remember. I don't think it really matters. But it was fun, and I really like this cover because this cover is like super duper ultra retro looking. Like this is like some 50s sci-fi stuff. It's great. But the neat thing about this is, and the thing that really made it kind of kick off, and you know what? Hold on. Looking at this, I don't think I realized that Malibu published all these different brands. Malibu and Aircell are the same company? I didn't know that. Uh, right. The thing that makes it really interesting is the stuff that happens in the first issue gets paralleled in the second issue. So in the first issue, they kill this guy because they think he's a traitor. In the second, or in this last issue, the same kind of thing happens. It's a great parallel. It's Chekhov's murder or something. Okay, that's kind of a stretch of the Chekhov's gun trope, but that's what it felt like. The skin trade. This is just kind of a. It has nothing to do with what skin trade usually means. There's this doctor. He's doing research. He's taking like newcomers' skin and putting it on other people, and they're doing it to control the drug trade. It's all right, but kind of like that first story, A Breed Apart. It was a little bit kind of eh. There's some good ink work in here, but some of the posing looks stiff. Like him right here. Like I'm sure a human head can turn that far. In fact, I'm doing it right now. But there's something about the way he's posed there. It just doesn't feel right. The muscles under his jacket, see, it's kind of defined. There's like no way to tell his arm. I don't think should. If you're doing that, your arm would probably have twisted a little bit and not be hanging down at your side. I don't know. Some of the posing looks kind of stiff. He looks kind of stiff. She does over here. And that's my main complaint about this book is that's what the art feels like. But it's also a very noir type story because you've got a noir detective, Mason Jar, if I remember his name right. Uh, the immigration guys had way too much fun with newcomer names. But you've got like this dude. He's a detective and he's investigating these deaths where newcomers are washing up on the beach. Oh, hold on. In fact, do we? Yeah, they're washing up on the beach, man. Which for one of the newcomers is pretty gnarly stuff. Like that's you just get eaten alive. Ooh, Ninja High School coming from Eternity Comics. What it wasn't from AP? Wasn't AP like started in the '80s? Did you know? What? I'm not gonna start worrying about that. We're just gonna keep going. Uh, and this builds up to this climax, like in a hospital or something, where they're getting ready to cut somebody's skin off, and look at that saline solution. Boom! It's like getting doused with acid, man. There's some good action in this, and there's lots of good drama. The writing is actually pretty good in this story. It keeps it tense. And the Spartans, this is the one I just read. It's got a different art style than the other books. You can see it like it wants to shade a lot. The other ones didn't really do that. They just kind of relied on that hachure shading. But this one, somebody definitely took like a pencil or some watercolor and just. And even though I literally just read this thing, I can't tell you what it was about. That's pretty forgettable. Oh, right. She's like from whatever government department it was that is there to help newcomers out. But I'm going to go right to the end of this because there's this funny bit. Like the bad guy is this overseer, and he goes to jail for what he was doing. Or am I confusing this with another story? Oh, I'm confusing it with the last story. Look at that. I don't even remember what happened in this one. I guess I read these like too many times in a row. No, it was totally the last one where the bad guy who was doing bad stuff, he ends up in prison. And as you know, this facility is designed exclusively for newcomers. It resembles our old ship in many respects, including the need for experienced management personnel, if you catch my meaning. So he's going to end up running. The bad guy is going to end up running the prison. Womp womp. Yeah, this one I don't even remember what this was about, but I remember I liked the gunfights and stuff in it. So it's got that going for it. I don't like the art in this one as much as some of the other ones. But there was some cool stuff going in here. I can't believe I don't really remember what happened. That's pretty forgettable. I won't say it was boring. I just don't remember it. So if you're going to check out one of these, and you're a little bit familiar with Alien Nation, so you kind of know the premise, who the newcomers are, that kind of stuff, this First Comers miniseries was actually pretty dope. And I really liked the Public Enemy here. Just because of this first issue where you get to see life aboard the ship. I thought that was pretty dope. The other ones, they just seem kind of forgettable. They tread similar ground to the TV show, which also had a bunch of like made-for-TV movies as part of its canon. There were like 3 or 4 of them, I think. They were produced a few years after the TV show was, because the TV show, it only ran from like 88 to 89 or 89 to 90, something like that. It was like a one-season show when I was a kid. I liked it back then, which is weird because it's not like actiony or cartoony or anything. I thought it was kind of cool, because the aliens, and they should have done more of that in these books. They're just different. They're absolutely just different from humans. Their diet is different. Actually, they go into that in the First Comers. When they're at that diner, they get a hamburger to split. It costs a lot because the town didn't want to serve them, and the guy gets it like rare or something. And he's like, oh, this should be bloody enough that you can keep it down. Like the newcomers, they have completely different dietary needs and restrictions and stuff like that. The TV show got a chance to kind of explore that in depth, like them drinking sour milk the same way we drink alcohol, stuff like that. Uh, and that was kind of missing from these. In fact, you probably could have replaced in a lot of these stores like a breed apart or skin trade. Like you could have taken the newcomer aspect of this out, and you would have had a pretty bog standard like crime story. I guess that's why I didn't like them so much. Is they're just kind of a normal, plain old crime story as opposed to something that's definitely going to leave that alien nation kind of mark on the story. Whereas the First Comers and the other miniseries that I really liked, Public Enemy. Whereas those two stories, they definitely could only really exist in that form as Alien Nation stories. You can't really tell that First Comers story where you have a human and an alien investigating aliens in any other way. I mean, I guess you could if you just like did the Men in Black setting or something. I mean, I don't know. That seems kind of a stretch though. And then Public Enemy, you have this life back home, life today, and then the events in each one kind of parallel each other. And without the Alien Nation background, the Tinctonese ship, you wouldn't get that kind of thing. All right, I've been talking about these 5 miniseries for a long time. I'm going to let y'all go. Thank you so much for joining me. Remember to like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. There was some cool art in some of these miniseries, some not so cool art, some good writing, some not so good writing. Lots of different people worked on these books, and you can really tell. These were all published in like the same year or two, something like that. They just kind of crammed them in there, I guess. And you might recognize some of these names, like Jimmy Palmiotti. Uh, there's some serious people working on some of these, you know? Anyway, I'll let you go. Thank you so much. I'm going to wave again. Bye-bye.